faith, but find out in every conversation explode the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. Stop trying to be the next Buffet or Warren Buffet or Jordan or start being the first you. One of his advocacy, no other than Mr. Michael Ijeh.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it, man.
Welcome, Mr. Michael on Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I missed?
Sure thing. So, Michael Ijeh, born and raised in Houston, Texas. Actually live in Lubbock, Texas now, as a professor in finance. Before becoming a professor, I worked as an institutional investor for 8 years at a large state public pension fund, and is there where I not only learned how to best invest, but also learned that you just cannot take what the best investors do and just apply it to your own portfolio and think it's going to work out. You need to add your own spin. You need to make it more tailored to yourself. And I found a way to do that for myself through basketball, which is, my first love.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Mr. Michael. Thank you. You can be a good DJ too, Mr. Michael. You have a golden voice. Oh.
Oh, I put that as the microphone. Although there's a funny story. I did think about
Mhm.
becoming a DJ very early on. The whole DJ EJ line was a thing. Yes.
That'd be awesome. So, today let's talk about what basketball can teach you about building a market bidding portfolio. So, tell us what is, or at its core, you argue basketball teaches us about building a market bidding portfolio. What is the single most important parallel between two disciplines? Is it strategy, psychology, or team construction?
It's a little bit of all three, but I would argue that it's more of um, identifying your beliefs. So, my bigger argument is that cross domain expertise leads to like monumental success in no matter what domain you want to apply it to. If you look at some of the most famous investors over time, start with Warren Buffett, people don't really think about that his domain that he actually learned investing principles was actually horse bet racing, like horse betting.
Mm,
So that was the first thing for him. His partner Charlie Munger, it was poker. There's a lot of famous investors that utilize poker, and the list is actually quite long in terms of how many great investors today actually learn how to invest um, from a different domain. So that's the same idea here. And the reason I believe that's the case is because once you identify those beliefs in that domain, it's easier to carry that over into investing. So for me, it was basketball. And of course, the big thing is not just, you know, your mentality or the mental aspect of the game, but in terms of building a team, me believing that having the right constructed team can beat a team full of star players, just star players alone that really don't have any thought process about why these players came come together. So it's a lot about how to build a portfolio. So that's a lot of my views, but I also I'm able to work with others if they have different views than me, but they have a view.
mm. Can beat the team. Well, so Mr. Michael, the game plan. Every great team has a game plan, but must adapt the real time. How does this translate to having a solid investment thesis while remaining agile enough to respond to a market run and gun or slow down moments?
Yes, and that is definitely one of the main aspects you can learn from basketball, and you need things you need to think about. There's this weird balance between you need to have enough resilience, patience, and adaptability, which is what you're getting at. So a lot of that does come from the belief in those beliefs that you have and you apply to your portfolio. This is very different than having this a process. Your philosophy needs to come before the process. So once you got your philosophy, You make sense of that philosophy, and there's going to be times where that philosophy is not working out, but you know why it's not working out. Now, there's a feel or an art aspect to it. Hasn't been working out for a very long time. When do I need to adapt? So that's where there's a constant need for not just learning about different situations or especially learning about different investors other than yourself, but also experimentation. You need to be running small experiments at all times and failing a lot in those experiments, because it's through that is where not only can you have the mindset to just stick with what you want to stick with and you understand why that's the case, but you're also testing things out, and you can see through those experiments and through other aspects that, okay, maybe I need to start thinking about adjusting to the times, whatever the times may be.
Adjusting the time in basketball, Mr. Michael, a high risk alley oop or deep three pointer can change momentum.
Mhm.
What's the investment equivalent? How do you thoughtfully incorporate a high risk, high reward plays without jeopardizing the entire game?
Yeah. So, and this is where some of my beliefs start to come out. So you'll hear them here. Uh, you can always not always, but you can definitely add stocks to your portfolio that have a high risk, high reward potential. This is where position sizing though comes into play. So you can think of this a lot as like the six man in
Okay.
basketball. So a lot of famous six men, uh, they tend to be high risk, high reward players. So there are times where you put them in and you need a spark, and you can tell very early on this is their game. Things are going to work out, and vice versa. You can tell early on in a game this is not it for them. They don't have it today, which is fine. You don't necessarily rely on them to do well, but if they do well, it's great. So taking that analogy over to your portfolio, this is where having smaller bets and being comfortable having lots of smaller bets will work out, because there's a belief that you should only have a concentrated portfolio of like maybe 10 or so stocks and really know them very well. And that is one way to go about things, but that's not the only way. And I would argue, especially in this six men analogy, that having a lot of small bets that if they work out, awesome. If they don't, it's not going to kill you. That's a great way to go about um, adding those high risk, high reward names to your portfolio.
High risk. Oh my goodness. Thank you for that empowering answer, Mr. Michael. So, the scoreboard versus the process. A team can play beautifully and still lose a game. How do you, as an investor, measure the quality of your process and decisions separately from short term portfolio performance?
Yes, this is a big area, because this is an area that a lot of investors, including myself, got wrong for a very long time. I tried to essentially look at how others look at their portfolio and not really find how I like based off of my beliefs and my personality how I should look at my portfolio, and it led to me essentially getting out the stock market at the wrong times in the past. So to get around this is where again the philosophy piece needs to come into play, because when you build out your philosophy, part of that building out process is understanding there are times where you are going to underperform, and that's okay. And there's times where the returns that you see might not necessarily match the other experiences. Like there's a way you can understand your portfolio to see that when you're outperforming the market or underperforming the market during certain time frames, it makes perfect sense. And even when you're outperforming, if it's not the time you normally would expect it to be outperforming, then yes, adjustments need to be made. So the philosophy piece helps a lot. But overall, it is part of this philosophy too is having other goalposts to look at other than just am I beating the market or not. So developing that ahead of time and constantly reviewing that is a big part of it. It is definitely in the mindset of process over looking at the final scoreboard.
Interesting. Mr. Michael, and on the team, construction and portfolio management, building a roster. A championship team needs stars, role players, and specialists. How do you construct a portfolio roster on what assets are you star players or your defensive specialist and your six man of the bench.
Yes. So I believe actually in thinking about the roster in I almost call it three different ways. So you have your main two or three star players, and then you have the rest of the quote unquote starters, and then you have the bench. And the bench, that's where you need to make a call on how much do you want to blend the bench time with the star players versus you want the bench to just come in and be its own team. So there's considerations to that. From a portfolio perspective, the way I actually think about it is your star players are the stocks that you love. These are the
Okay.
stocks that match your personality. These are stocks that get you excited in the morning when you first look at the portfolio. This is where your eyes go. So these are probably your highest weighted stocks in your portfolio today. Then you have the stocks that you like. So there's elements that you really love about them, but you don't love everything. There's some things that are just a little bit off, or more importantly, you recognize that there's uh, with your star players, they have some weaknesses. So stars you like, the rest of the players you like, they help fill in a lot of those gaps. And then you actually have the players that you quote unquote hate. And that sounds strong, but in reality, it's more of a again, this comes back to like a personality difference. There's a personality element to investing. If you're more of a growth investor, like myself, you're not always going to like value stocks, or maybe even more strongly, you might have a little bit of a disdain for them. Might not be the biggest fan of them, but that's okay. To win in the stock market, similar, and see this similar into basketball, you win through a symmetry. I have this idea. Alpha is a symmetry. You need to create the symmetry. So when your stocks you love are doing well, everything's great. If the stocks you love are doing fine, but the stocks you hate are doing well, and you have just enough of that exposure, you'll actually make it out all right. Now, when the stocks you love are doing poorly, how much can we limit the damage? So that's how you can kind of think through, like how I think through roster construction, and use a similar mindset or like sub classification for building a stock portfolio.
Mhm. So in basketball, you build a through through the draft, right? And free agency. What is the investments parallel? Is it finding growth stocks versus buying established blue chips or ETF?
There is there is a sense of that. So this is where the idea of the company life cycle comes into play. And the best way to think about that is there are stocks that are growing a lot, high growth, uh, and are unprofitable or barely becoming profitable. And when you look at them from a traditional valuation lens, they look crazy. So a good example that's always controversial: Palantir. Palantir sits fairly in this bucket of in their life cycle, they're a younger stock. They're a younger company. And when you look at them through a traditional lens, not gonna be a fan. That's like viewing players in the draft. You have to look at them differently than looking at a veteran player. And blue chip stocks, for example, you can look at through a veteran player's lens, which is a more traditional way you can look at a player. So you have to develop that lens. You have to develop to look at different types of stocks differently versus where they are in the life cycle. So, younger stock versus maybe hitting their prime versus they're kind of on the other side of their prime. And a lot of those blue chip stocks, they're on the other side, so they're a lot easier to evaluate. You can just pay close attention to the numbers. Whereas with these younger stocks, you the narrative, the story around the stock matters a little bit more, and what you're hoping for is that development happens over time, that they do hit their prime at a good pace. So it requires looking at things a little bit different on both ends of the spectrum.
Mr. Michael, let's talk about the positionless basketball and diversification. Modern basketball values versatile players. That's the concept of positionless investing or holding assets that serve multiple roles make for a more resilient portfolio.
It can. Now, the reason I say that it can is that on one end, positionless basketball makes sense. But at the same time, certain roles still need to be filled. So this is where I have an idea of smart diversification. You don't have to become fully diversified. You have to become diversified enough. And the idea is, especially in basketball, you identify your star players and then you build around them. You build around them for complement skills as well as certain aspects that you know that your star players are missing. So if you're going more of a positionless route in basketball, for example, you do know that let's say it's a you have a center, but they act more like a point guard. Okay, that's great, but there's certain things that centers are expected to do, mainly in the rebounding and protecting the paint on defense and things of that nature. And if you're in a positionless sense, if your center's not doing that, you need to bring somebody on that will do that, even if you're not playing them the same amount of time. You don't have the same amount of time on the court. So you have to think about portfolios in that way. The best way to think about it is, again, start with the stocks you love, and based off the stocks you love, understand what drives those stocks. So it could be a certain economic environment. It could be that maybe you're like me, you're a growth investor, so they have a growth tilt to them, or vice versa. They could have more of a value tilt to them. Uh, it could be certain things that happen with the company or certain where they sit in a supply chain aspect, things that can change. So there's different elements that you can look at and figure out that, hey, this is where we're leaning with the stars. Now I need to start building around that aspect. And once you start building around that aspect with what's missing, now you not only have the positionless aspect like it is in basketball, but you're still filling the roles and filling the buckets that need to be filled to win in a basketball game.
What a nice analogy, Mr. Michael. So tell us, what are your short term and long term goals?
Yeah. So over the next few months, I'm trying to get out on different podcasts, share my message. And the big thing I'm trying to share is this idea of developing your own philosophy. And in developing your own philosophy in investing, it will carry over to other aspects in your life. This all will culminate in me opening enrollment for my hybrid coaching program, Dynasty Investing Playbook, where I help those who are interested in investing and have been scared off the stock market before and have tried what other people have suggested and it just didn't stick with them. Just like I went through that. Walking
Mhm.
through, what basketball is my main thing and sports in general is my main thing. But whatever that domain is, help you start to find yourself through that domain. And once you start to find that yourself and find your beliefs and take those beliefs from that domain, move them over to investing, help you build a process around those beliefs, and honestly just help a lot of people just gain that inner belief in themselves because a lot of this comes from not having that inner belief. So once you have that inner belief and you recognize you see things that other investors do not see, then yeah, you can stick through your process. You can look at things and look at the world differently and even go through, some elements of a losing streak and not overreact. So yeah, that's the end goal. That's the short-term goal, get out and share that message. Long-term goal, open up enrollment for hybrid coaching program for those who are interested in taking a step further.
Good luck to your goals, Mr. Michael, and looking forward for more success. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there want to be like you?
Experiment. That's the big thing. Experimentation. I will share just a quick little bit about myself in terms of growing up in a household where I definitely identify myself as an insecure overachiever, uh, somebody that looked to achieve a lot of things and received that external validation and almost thought that I was getting love based off of that external validation. and it does lead you to some level of success professionally, but you never really truly trust your gut. And to truly trust your gut, you got to try out some things. And trying out some things means failing. You have to get comfortable with failing. Fail at a small level, small stakes. Don't swing for the fences now. But in order to find yourself, you do have to fail, because there's a classic thought from some coaches is that you win or you learn. You don't think about all these lessons when things are going great, but when you're losing, this is when the lessons hit, and that's what failing is. So be comfortable with failure in any aspect in life, but through that failure, you will grow and truly find yourself.
Yes, don't be afraid, people, for failure because you will learn from them.
Mm.
And thank you for that advice, Mr. Michael. So let's talk about the zone defense versus man to man. In a zone, you defend an area. In man to man, you stick to a specific opponent. Is this like a sector focus like ADF or versus active stock picking man to man? When is it its strategy most effective?
Yeah. So a better way to think about this is through matchups on the court. So that's what you're trying to get at. A lot of people run zone when they're trying to either get a team to shoot a specific shot, or they actually have a weakness that they're trying to cover up. One way to get around that on the matchup front is to first identify the matchups where you are the strongest and where you are the weakest. So, and a lot of that just comes from looking at your portfolio relative to a benchmark. That is something that a lot of investors don't do or don't know how to do, but just figure out. And you can just start off at the sector level, especially since I mainly preach active stock picking. So take the S&P 500. S&P 500, a third of that benchmark um, is made up of tech stocks, just the technology sector. And then if you count some of the tech adjacent stocks, you get about half of the S&P 500 is in technology or even AI related stocks. So, how are you going to play that? Are you going to look to match mano y mano? Or are you going to look to you have a bearish view on tech and AI, so you're going to have a little bit less? Or do you have a bullish view? Are you going to have a little bit more? So, taking a look at not just the team that you're playing against, but also your own team. So you need to make the comparison between both, not just look at your own, but look at the team you're playing against. And again, that's actually very important if you're trying to beat the market. And I don't know if all investors are actually trying to beat the market or they're investing for some other alternative. Now, if you're running into the issue I ran into investing, you're trying to beat the market. And that's okay. That's okay. People say it's impossible or it's very tough to do. I found that it's easier to do once you know what you're doing. But a huge part of that is figuring out what are the matchups I'm looking for and where am I weak, and should I use something like a zone defense to cover that up? And a lot of that might be using certain ETFs to cover where you're weak, or am I just going to go man to man across the board and pick individual stocks for every sector?
Hmm. So, Mr. Michael, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in sixth season, abstract poetry in third season, and my book 101 review in sixth season as well. Comedy 101 in third season, and my food 101 in sixth season as well. Geography 101, love letters, Movie 101, Review Music 101, our fifth season, Science 101, Sex 101, fourth season, and My Baby Podcast, Trivia 101, Law 101, Mental Health 101, Motivation 101, Entrepreneurship 101, and of course, Bible Verses 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcasts. So, Mr. Michael, tell us sustained success is a basketball requires a culture and a long term vision beyond one championship. What does it mean to build an investment dynasty, a portfolio that can not only grow but can sustain and transfer wealth across generations?
It goes back to something that you brought up earlier, which is the ability to adapt to the times, and having that built into your process. So the idea of winning the championship in general, championship teams, they do something great. They found, depending on the time that they're playing in and the rules, and they might have lucked up on getting certain players, they found a way to do something better than the rest of the other teams, and they were able to do it at the highest level. Then from there, to sustain it, turning it from just one season to multiple seasons, they were still able to find that thing, that special aspect about them that they did at the highest level, while making small incremental adjustments along the way. I think a lot about the Bulls dynasty, the difference between the first 3 years versus the last 3 years. There was changes in the roster that definitely separate the two. And what people don't realize, there were incremental changes in the roster and in roles between 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 5, and 6, but they see the big gap between the first three and the second three. Even the last championship the Bulls won, Michael Jordan did a little bit more than maybe he was expecting to. Dennis Rodman had a bigger role, and Scottie Pippen was struggling with his back and struggling with injuries, and the role players had to play a higher role than they did in the past. So you have to be open and willing to adjust as the market adjusts, and you have to make sure you're paying attention to that at all times. So you just can't get stuck in your ways. You found your philosophy once, we're done. No, it's a continuous evolution. It's a continuous learning process that you need to go through.
Mr. Michael, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Please invite our listeners to support your business and focus your reliable projects that you're doing right now.
Yes. So I brought up this idea of a coaching program that I am building up a waiting list for at this time. So the waiting list will be in the link the description of this podcast. I'm hoping so. Or yeah, so it's there. It will be, yeah, it's just a waiting list. Answer a couple of questions, and you will be notified once enrollment opens up. I'm a professor, so I'll work around that schedule. So once things calm down, I'll make the enrollment
Yes, we call us about Mr. Michael Ijeh because if you support him for sure, more and more empowering coaching. All right. I have one more last question, Mr. Michael. If you could give a piece of coaching advice from the hardwood to individual investor trying to build the portfolio for the long run, what would you clipboard say?
I would say, I've already mentioned a lot about finding your voice, but another way to put this is, from a basketball perspective, find your shot. Be open to shooting it, even if you're missing a lot. It's the inner belief that matters. You need to find that inner belief. So whatever it takes to find that inner belief. Experimenting helps, but find that inner belief.
Inner belief, definitely. I'm launching my new podcast, Coaching 101. Mr. Michael, would you please come over and let's talk about coaching itself?
Sure thing. Absolutely.
Yes. So, Mr. Michael, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you.
Monica people, see you soon.